On a chilly evening in New York City, within the luxurious Golden Fork, a restaurant on Fifth Avenue, Robert Langley sat by himself. He possessed it all: money, power, and respect. But none of it brought him happiness. As laughter echoed and crystal glasses gleamed, he felt a void within. His phone vibrated, but he chose to ignore it. Nothing seemed important that night, or so he believed. Suddenly, the door burst open, and heads turned as a young girl dashed inside. She wore an oversized bright red hoodie that swamped her petite figure. Her eyes searched the room until they locked onto Robert. Without a moment's hesitation, she rushed toward him. "My mom needs help now," she exclaimed. Robert's chest tightened. He wasn't accustomed to being interrupted, especially by someone so misplaced in such a setting. The restaurant hummed around them, but for Robert, all else began to blur. It was only him and this girl with wide, begging eyes. For a fleeting instant, he contemplated saying no. After all, what could he possibly do? He wasn't a hero or a doctor. He was merely a man trying to enjoy his dinner. However, he noticed the urgency written on her face, reminding him of his sister, Emily, who had passed away years prior after a long illness. She had been young, too. Without further thought, Robert stood up. "Take me to her," he said with resolve. The girl blinked, clearly startled by his agreement. Then she nodded rapidly and turned toward the door. Robert grabbed his coat and trailed after her into the night. The contrast was jarring. One moment, he was engulfed in luxury. The next, he was stepping onto cold city streets illuminated by flickering streetlights. They halted at a dilapidated building that appeared on the verge of collapse. Inside, the hallway reeked of dampness, and the walls bore cracks. "This way," Jasmine whispered, guiding him up the stairs. At the end of the hallway, she opened a door, and what Robert saw next made his stomach plummet. A woman lay on the floor, pale and motionless, her breathing shallow, nearly imperceptible. "She collapsed," Jasmine sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't know what to do." Without wasting a moment, Robert took out his phone and dialed 911. As he awaited the ambulance, he knelt next to the woman, clutching her hand. For the first time in years, he experienced something genuine, something greater than himself. The ambulance arrived swiftly, its sirens slicing through the stillness of the night. Paramedics rushed in, hoisting Tanya onto a stretcher. Jasmine clung to Robert's arm, her small hands trembling. "Will she be okay?" she asked, her voice quivering. Robert couldn't provide an answer. All he could do was nod and assure her, "I'll stay with you at the hospital." The doctors worked diligently to stabilize Tanya, while Robert remained at Jasmine's side, watching her pace and wipe tears from her cheeks. He wished to comfort her, but felt at a loss for words. Instead, he quietly covered the medical expenses without asking any questions. Hours later, when Tanya finally regained consciousness, weak but alive, Jasmine cried tears of relief. "Thank you," she whispered to Robert, her voice brimming with gratitude. "You didn't have to do this." Deep down, Robert understood he had to. Something within him had shifted that night. For years, he had lived behind barriers of wealth and privilege, detached from the challenges of others. Now, those barriers were beginning to crack. In the following weeks, Robert found himself visiting Tanya and Jasmine regularly. Their small apartment was modest, a stark contrast to his penthouse, yet it radiated a warmth his own home lacked. Tanya shared stories of balancing two jobs to provide for her family and her aspirations for Jasmine's future. "You're stronger than most people I know," Robert told her one day. Tanya managed a faint smile. "Strength doesn't mean never falling. It means getting back up every time you do." Her words lingered with him long after his visits. Back in his empty penthouse, Robert gazed at the city skyline. For the first time in years, he felt restless, not due to something he lacked, but because of what he could offer. An internal shift had occurred within Robert. He couldn't help but think of Tanya and Jasmine, their struggles, their strength, and their hope. It altered his perspective on the world. For years, he had concentrated solely on himself and building wealth while overlooking its true purpose. Now he yearned to utilize his resources for something grander than his own desires. One evening, sitting in his office with a view of the city, an idea struck him. What if he could assist children like Jasmine, those with big dreams but without the means to achieve them? That night, he began making calls, and by morning he had established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. The word spread quickly, and soon he received letters from families expressing gratitude for the opportunity he'd provided their children. One letter caught his attention. A boy named Marcus shared how the scholarship allowed him to enroll in college and pursue engineering. "You saved my future," Marcus wrote. Inspired, Robert went further, investing in affordable housing projects to create secure homes for families struggling to make ends meet. People began calling him a hero, but Robert was indifferent to the accolades. What mattered to him was the difference he was creating. Meanwhile, Tanya regained her strength and launched a small catering business with Robert's help. Her food gained popularity within the community, generating enough income for her to finally feel some relief. Jasmine excelled in school, achieving top grades and aspiring to become a doctor one day. One afternoon, Jasmine turned to Robert and asked, "Why do you keep helping us?" Robert paused before simply replying, "Because I needed a reminder of what truly matters." Jasmine smiled and said, "Well, you remind me that good people still exist." Her words lingered with him long after she left. For the first time in many years, Robert felt truly alive, not because of what he possessed, but because of what he contributed. Years went by, and Robert's kindness rippled outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. The scholarship fund grew, enabling hundreds of students to pursue their ambitions. The affordable housing initiatives transformed neighborhoods, providing families with stability they previously lacked. Tanya's catering business became a local favorite, even attracting the interest of a renowned chef who proposed a partnership. The most astonishing twist occurred when Marcus, the boy whose letter once moved Robert, walked into his office. Now a successful engineer, Marcus introduced Robert to influential connections in industries he had long sought to break into. Together, they launched innovative projects that rekindled Robert's career and brought him professional fulfillment after decades. Throughout this journey, Jasmine remained a steady presence in Robert's life. She graduated high school at the top of her class, earning a scholarship to medical school. On graduation day, she stood on stage to deliver a speech. "I wouldn't be standing here today without someone who believed in me and my mom when we had nothing," she declared, her voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "That person showed me that kindness can change everything. So thank you, Mr. Langley, for saving us and for showing me what it truly means to live." The crowd erupted in applause, and Robert sat there, tears streaming down his cheeks. For so long, he had equated wealth with success, but now he understood the truth. Real wealth was about connection, purpose, and making a difference. As Jasmine stepped off the stage and enveloped him in a tight embrace, Robert whispered, "Thank you, Jasmine. You changed my life too." In that moment, two lives, one rich in resources, the other rich in resilience, had transformed each other forever. So, where do you come from? And what will your next act of kindness bring? Years later, Robert stood on a sunlit park bench overlooking Manhattan. The city had evolved, but some things remained unchanged. The hum of traffic, the chatter of hurried people, and the endless promise of new beginnings. Beside him sat Jasmine, now Dr. Jasmine Carter, a pediatrician renowned for her commitment to underserved communities. She smiled as she observed children playing on the swings, their laughter ringing through the air. "You've come a long way," Robert said, warmth in his voice. "So have you," Jasmine replied, turning toward him. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just another wealthy guy who didn't care about anyone but himself." Robert chuckled. "And now, I see you're proof that people can change for the better." They fell into a comfortable silence for a moment, watching the world swirl around them. Then, Jasmine pulled out her phone to show him a photo of Tanya, proudly standing in front of her catering business, which had expanded across multiple locations in the city. "She's doing amazing," Jasmine said. "And it's all because of you." Robert shook his head. "No, it's because of her. She's the one who never gave up." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "Still, you gave her a chance when no one else would. That's what makes you different." As they conversed, a young boy dashed over, clutching a soccer ball. "Dr. Carter, can you help me practice?" he asked eagerly. Jasmine beamed and stood. "Of course. Be right back," she told Robert before jogging off to join the boy. Watching her go, Robert felt a profound sense of peace. He reflected on how far they had all come since that pivotal night at the Golden Fork. A desperate plea from a child had ignited a chain reaction of kindness, resilience, and transformation. He glanced at his hands, recalling the frail weight of Tanya's hand that night in the hospital. Back then, he had felt powerless, but now he realized that even small acts of kindness could trigger waves of change. As the sun sank below the skyline, casting a golden hue over the park, Robert murmured to himself, "Wherever you're from doesn't matter. What matters is where you choose to go and who you decide to help along the way." And with that, he smiled, knowing that his journey was far from over.